I guess our thing is just gonna be no set intro. I guess we're just gonna bring it in randomly every time. Fuck it, right now,
We're
right?
organic. We do it organic
There you
here.
go. We have Ed Latimore we're gonna be chatting with today. He's a fascinating dude. He's been a lot of things in life. He was a professional boxer at one point. He's a best-selling author. He got a physics degree, and more recently, he's getting into competitive chess playing. He's working on another book right now. Yeah, we talked about a lot of different things.
True Renaissance man, and he definitely shatters the dumb fighter stereotype because like a couple of the guests we've had on the show, like you could tell they're intelligent guys, and like you and me, we're well researched guys, and like I would say we're pretty smart in our own right. But then there's some guests we talk to, and I'm like, dude, I am fucking stupid. Like when he's going on about some of the physics stuff,
Oh
you can
yeah,
tell he's a very smart guy and just a well-rounded dude, super cool guy, fun conversation. I like the spirit science spin on things, if you will, if you want to call it that we get into towards the end.
you could always count on you for having the definition and the origin of words, dude, and I love it because I always learn some new shit. Like I never know the origin of these words, and you always hit me with some crazy shit. So it's cool, dude. I appreciate that.
I feel like the etymology of words and the origins of words and looking back as far as you can, even when it comes to like names or places names and shit like that. That's a good way to try and go all the way back. And sometimes it leads to speculating, and maybe it's not as accurate, or I'm reading into it. I like to think I've uncovered quite a bit of things with that. And when it comes to the El Cool thing, yeah, that's very real, and it's very telling, I would say.
You'll hear the conversation we had regarding it, how you tie it all into the spirits, and yeah, it's good shit. But before we get into the Ed Latimore conversation, if you're a fan of the podcast, or whether it's your first time here, we appreciate you no matter what. If you are liking what we're putting down, though, please go ahead and give us a 5-star review on whatever platform you are listening to us on, as well as give us a follow, like, subscribe, all the social media platforms, X, Instagram, YouTube. We have a Patreon that we're going to start really kicking up, getting some more content on. And we appreciate all the listeners that we have worldwide. So us being, a fairly new podcast, we really do appreciate all the listeners. We have a ton of listeners from the Oceania area, which is like Australia, New Zealand. We have a lot of listeners in Asia, Europe, North America, some in Africa, so it's literally all over the fucking world, dude. Not too many in South America. We're not really representing there, so don't know what's going on, but maybe we need to get some Spanish guests on or something. I don't know. Maybe some mamacitas.
We haven't had a female guest just yet, so we got to get a little more inclusive here.
Yeah.
The fact that we have had such widespread listeners and as much as support as we've had so far with being a pretty new podcast, definitely greatly appreciated. We want to hear from you guys. We want you to reach out to us if you want to be on the podcast, you want to nominate someone that you want to be a guest on the show. Definitely reach out to us on social media.
Nominate. That's a funny way of putting it. Yes. Shoot us an email, conspiracyandchill@yahoo.com. Hit one of us up on social media, or you can hit the podcast up at Two Truth Seekers, or you can hit Mr. Higgins up or myself up. Go ahead and do all of those, one of those, whichever way is easiest for you. If you do have a suggestion, or you just want to shoot the shit, because Tom's not just saying we want to build a community here. We really do want to build a community of like-minded individuals, because if you are like Tom, and you are like me, and you are like Mystic Mark, and a lot of these guys out here in this community, it could be lonely when you're trying to express these ideas with loved ones. So, yeah, come on. Let's build a fucking community, guys. And girls.
Yeah, let's get it.
Not
we
so
gotta
much
get
girls.
our first female guest on here.
Preferably a hot mamacita.
Yeah, we won't be complaining about that. Maybe we'll have to wait till we get some video on.
Yes. Yeah, well, yeah, that might, that might be the breast course of action, if you know what I'm saying.
Entice the people to get on that Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
We're all human.
You know who else is human?
Who's that?
Ed Latimore.
Great guy. One of a kind human, for sure.
Enjoy. Yeah, so we got Ed Latimore. You are a former heavyweight boxer, you're a best-selling author, you have a physics degree, and you're a competitive chess player, which I just found super awesome. I'm not good, but I love chess. So
I'm
welcome.
I'm getting better. I'm not as good as I should be yet, but I am. As I learn how to learn chess more, I get better at chess. But that's like anything, is you learn how to learn it. I think people forget that that's a very important component of improving. You have to know what it takes. There's like the general, here's how we get better at stuff, and then there are the specifics, just how you get better at this thing.
You kind of taken that approach into a lot of different areas. Like I said, you were a former heavyweight boxer, super successful at that. You're a best-selling author, so obviously you've done well for yourself in that regard. You got a degree in physics, so it speaks for itself. And now you're getting into the realm of competitive chess. So is that something that you kind of look for, like the next big challenge for yourself?
You know what it really comes down to is, when I was a kid, I grew up poor. I mean, about as poor as you can grow up in America. I'm always careful to say in America, because now that I've traveled around and I've seen some places, we live like kings. Even our poor people do. It's wild. But that doesn't mean it's like easy. I just mean it in the grand scheme of things. But I bring that up to say there were a lot of things I could not do when I was a child, and like all of my interests, I never got a chance to partake in any of them. It wasn't until I got to high school where I could, like, do things that I wanted to do, and even still I couldn't really do them, and I can only do them because I could, work and pay for myself. So pretty much what my life is now is like, okay, here are these things that I found interesting when I was like 14 or 15, but I either didn't have the funds or didn't have the support to go into them. And now that I do, what I've pretty much done in my adult life is figure out how to do them and see if I want to stick with it or go long, or maybe I'm just not cut out for it. But really, if you just keep sticking with one thing and you stay focused, you can go pretty far. No, maybe like marginal natural athletic ability, like marginal. I found out, talking to some guys, and I'm like, but I think I did pretty well as both an amateur and a professional fighter, and like marginal math, worse than marginal math ability. I failed math like badly, to the point where I didn't actually technically graduate from high school, but that's another story. But to go on and get my physics degree, I was push myself and see what I could do and get better. So it's not that I'm looking for the next thing. I'm always looking for a thing that will challenge me, and it will is like interesting as well. Like, let me go and do the things that I couldn't do when I was younger.
Mm. And Pittsburgh, right? You grew up in Pittsburgh. How was growing up?
Growing up was I divided my childhood into two time periods, prior to high school and high school, before and after high school. Before high school, I didn't really have a lot of fun. I didn't like things, because I went to, I grew up in a public housing project. And the way those schools break things down, you go to school with people in your neighborhood. And so I went to school with people in my neighborhood, or like the neighboring poor neighborhoods. Some of us were projects, others were just like really low class, like barely working class neighborhood. So I went to school with a lot of those people. And I didn't really, I'm just not that dude. The way I was designed, built, whatever, subtle influences from the influences I did have. And I didn't enjoy things. Now, when I got to high school, it was a lot different, because I went to high school in a magnet program, so I had to apply to get in and all that good stuff. And when I went there, that high school was, I think it took me an hour to get there and an hour to get home. So I spent 2 hours a day traveling, but it was in a completely different part of town. And it was with people in a completely different social economic background. Like, people don't believe me when I tell them, but high school was the first time that I knew anyone where like both of their parents were around, like at home, for example, or I met anyone that didn't live in they weren't poor. I mean, like not rich. I mean, there were some rich kids because of the way the school worked, but most of them they just weren't poor. And it was a really interesting dynamic to see what a family looks like and what friends were like from different, backgrounds. And my friends, I always say I was the beneficiary of positive peer pressure. I just happened to become friends with a group of kids, like none of them drank in high school or anything like that. I had a great time, a great childhood after when I turned 14 and I stopped spending. I mean, I didn't even spend holidays at home mostly. My friends really were like my surrogate family. So that's what it was like for me growing up here.
You mentioned influences. Who were some of your influences growing up?
Growing up, I didn't have, before 14, I didn't have anything. I knew what I didn't want to be. That's pretty much it. Like, most of my family, I'm trying to think. On my mom's side, I don't think I know anybody who hasn't served some degree of a prison sentence, or didn't have like multiple baby daddies or things like that. They were people I didn't want to be like. And on my dad's side, more or less the same thing. Not so much with the prison part, but lots of negligence in other ways, and still in the projects or not being around. So I didn't have any influence there. But when I got to high school, it's not like they were role models, but it was a small change that at the beginning didn't do much, but over the course of my life, being around these people really, really just made a difference. It helped me see that there was a different way to be. Of course, you resisted at first because you don't know anything else. And it's not like they were like forcing values on me. It's just that I didn't. It was a confusing time for me because, on the one hand, I'm coming from this background where there's like food is more or less rationed. Like when you're on public assistance, you got what you get until the next month. And so it's not a ration in the purest sense, but it's, you better be careful. Meanwhile, I go to my friend's house and they're able to, let me come over for dinner every night. And it's not a big deal to have extra food and stuff like that. And like I had one, when my dad died, he actually had a life insurance policy. And I got like $55,000 when I was 18. And one of my friends' dad, he was like, you should do X, Y, and Z with the money. I just had no concept of saving, investing, and really the future. Kind of like, most people who come up from the background does. And I wish I had listened to him.
Right. You're 18 too, though, you're 18.
Yeah. So it's just not going, it just didn't work. But over time, I was like, you guys, I tell them all the time randomly on Facebook whenever I'm thinking of stuff. I'm like, you guys, you changed and saved my life. Who knows who I would have turned into.
How'd you get into boxing?
That's what I want to ask.
Oh man, that's another story of just random influences, not from where I came. So I didn't start boxing until I was 22.
Okay.
Which is like, kind of old, but for the heavyweight division, not that old because your body has to grow and mature into that size, which is why you see a lot of these guys come from other sports. You like if you boxed from a child, from younger days, unless you're like 6'5", you're not going to become a heavyweight. It's just, you just don't carry enough muscle, and the way training is, you don't put that muscle on, right? So at 22, I was dating this girl, and I had tried college and got kicked out, and I was drinking, and I was going to, I wasn't going anywhere. I was working at Starbucks. That's what I was doing, and I used to like rail against college all the time, like how ridiculous it was. And I still think it's ridiculous. The difference is now I got a degree and you really can't argue with me or at least you have to form a stronger argument than you're just mad you don't have a degree. You didn't do it. I'm like, all right. But at that point I didn't. And this didn't go over too well with the girl's mom I was dating because she was a college professor. Oof. And one day she said to me, well, let's pretend you're right and colleges is worthless. Tell me what you've done with your life in the past 4 years other than show up to my house and eat my food. And then she threw me out. And I was like, I shed a man tear and I was sad about it. But she was absolutely correct. And I didn't have any sweat equity. Like if I died that day, what would you be able to say about me? you know? So I started looking around for things to do to kind of just really not be a boring dude and not be like just a typical lame, not going anywhere. And I settled on two ideas. I was going to either enlist in the army and go full time active duty, but that's when we were invading Iraq and we were just throwing bodies at the problem. And I was like, I don't want to change that much. And the other option was YouTube had just come out and I was watching fight videos on YouTube and I said, I could try this out. And I had no idea what it could be, but it was something other than what I was doing, and it was sweat equity somewhere. Like you ever see the old Most Interesting Man in the World commercials? And it's like, it's never too early to start beefing up your obituary. That always stuck with me. And that's how I looked at boxing. I was like, it's never too early to start beefing up my obituary. So I got into it and started training. My first year, I didn't know which discipline I'd stick with. So for 6 out of 7 days in a week, I was training at either a boxing class, either boxing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, or an MMA one. And I just did it all. I've actually got 2 amateur MMA fights, lost them both, but like it was a good exposure. And I said, I'm gonna stick with boxing because it just made sense I weighed out all the pros and cons and tried to look at the future. And I said, all right, boxing is really the best thing for me to do. So that's how that happened.
Did you get into a lot of scraps as a kid, or was there a reason that you thought boxing?
So the reason I thought boxing was good is because I was an all right football player. It was really fast, really athletic, really strong. So I said, all right, how can I use that now that I'm not playing sports, not in college and not in high school? And that was my thought. I said, all right, combat sports. Because like the cool thing about combat sports is that you don't have to be like enrolled in an institution somewhere to do them. You just show up, do them, go down to, and then pay your fees to USA Boxing if you're an amateur, or to whatever athletic commission is when you're a pro, and you can take a fight. So there was not as high of a barrier to entry for someone. And in fact, I would say that if you don't start playing the sport when you're younger, the other sports, you can't pick up basketball and hope to get to a high level when you're 19. It's just not going to happen. If for any other reason, aside from the competition, aside from the barriers in place, like the competition, because they're more skill based and there's organizations and things you got to do. But that's the one reason I chose boxing. The other reason, the other thing you brought up that I scrap a lot. I fought a lot as a kid, like not after 14 because I was no longer in that environment. But I did fight a lot as a kid. But it was never like let me go and pick a fight because I hated fighting, man. I didn't want to like bang with people. But I also knew that if I wasn't willing to bang with people, then my life was going to get a lot harder every day. Once you are identified as prey, predators start treating you that way. So you can't ever let yourself be seen as a weak link. They have to know that they may win the fight, whatever, right? But they got to know that there's a cost to messing with you. And if there's no cost that will be enacted, then you're gonna have a hard time, man. A hard time, and I didn't want a hard time. Growing up in the projects in the school I went to, it's amazing how similar a lot of that is to like, I think prison dynamics. I've never been to jail, but from what I hear, because like my neighborhood, it was a gated community. There were like 3 ways, and then they were all gated with security, and those same ways out. Everyone knew everyone where everyone lived. Once they knew that you weren't going to fight back, then you would be that person they would pick on. They would try and take stuff from. They would try and bully.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things my mom did really well, she was like, you get into a fight with somebody, you don't run. We're gonna go back out there and fight them. They got to know. She didn't understand the dynamic. I think it was just something all people who grow up in this environment more or less intuitively grasp. It's just that you can't let yourself be punked, be bullied, or anything like that, because it's not like they get satisfied. It's like, once somebody realizes they can take advantage of you, it's going to keep taking advantage of you. And that's sad that it's like that, but that's human nature, unfortunately.
I can speak the same. I've always hated bullies, and I never started a fight in my life, but I was a skater when I was growing up, and being a skateboarder, just a bunch of punk, unsupervised kids hanging out at the skate park, it's bound to happen, and you're going to get into it here and there, and I had my fair share of scraps growing up. Something else you said too about the fact that you can kind of just, make your own path within combat sports. And I've said it quite a few times when we've talked to other fighters on the show that there's a large crossover between having alternative views or, being more open-minded and being willing to take the path of, stepping into a combat arena. And it's one of the few avenues that, like, there's very little outside influence, like other sports, other like businesses or jobs or whatever. It's about who you know or how your social networking is. And when it comes to fighting, it really is, for the most part, outside of maybe the referees or other things, man to man. It's you and the work you've put in, you and your mentality, your spirit versus the other guys. So I've always loved that aspect of it, and it just lends itself well to having a strong or a unique mindset.
Yeah. I always say there's nothing quite like boxing or any combat sport. I should say combat sport. When I say combat sport, because I get a lot of flack for this when I talk about it on social media. When I say combat sport, I'm talking about striking. Brazilian jiu-jitsu and all that, and wrestling has its place. But the big difference between those activities and ones where there is striking is that in those activities, striking is penalized. In the striking arts, that's how the score is kept. So no matter what, like, that's how the damage is done, and that's how one determines who is winning the fight is the damage acquired. And there's something very unique about that. Yeah, you got to be in shape to wrestle and all that, but you got to be in shape to run a marathon. You got to be. You don't have to develop this capacity to push through pain, and not just push through like the pain of being exhausted, but like when someone is trying to hurt you and you are dead tired, like, you got to fight back. You have to learn to manage your adrenaline under the threat of like very real negative consequences if you don't do well. There's something that just there's something about all of that, which is why I think all combat sports are a great analogy for life. And if you can manage to do it and do it well and let it transform you. Not everyone lets it transform them. They keep thinking they could fuck around and do drugs and drink and stuff and compete. And maybe there's like an incredibly gifted athlete out there, your John Jones, man. Maybe like you can do coke and get out there and compete for a while, but you got to let it clean you out if you want to be good, if you're like most people. When you defend a strike, it hurts. That's something that a lot of people don't understand. It's not, the only difference is whether it disrupts your conscious or your equilibrium and your consciousness. But it all hurts. Like, it's all very, very painful, and you learn to push through that. And there's a lot of analogies to that, and just general living.
When it comes to chess, I'm not really a chess player myself. I've always kind of wanted to get more into it, but unfortunately, I don't have much experience in it. How would you say the crossover between the tactics of boxing when it comes to having to manage the offense and the defense all at the same time, and then going into a chess career? What do you think is the crossover?
Well, the crossovers, there's a lot of frustration when you don't get something right and you keep losing for the wrong, and you're like, why did I lose there? Why did I lose there? the frustration of wanting to improve and coming up against your limits, that is very real. So unlike the combat sports, chess is continually evolving. Like I've got a theory. I'm not so sure about MMA because I don't know that world that well. But boxing, from a skill perspective, is, oh man, it is degraded. It's compared to, like, 30, 40 years ago. Every other sport, everyone's gotten better because the knowledge is constantly tested, and if it doesn't work, it's thrown out because there's so much money involved. No one wants to make a mistake. Everyone's trying to keep a job. It's a competitive environment, so everyone continues to get better over time, and you see that in the metrics of the athletes. They continue to get bigger, stronger, and faster. Right. And in boxing, it's like the opposite. It's weird. How does this relate to chess? Chess is a lot like the sports where there is continual improvement because there's a share of knowledge and no one claims to have a grasp on their tactics. Like, if you ever talk to, like, boxing coaches, they treat their methods like it's gospel and just assume that not everyone's gonna make it. And like, imagine if you were even a high school football coach of a decent program, and your philosophy was, last year we went 10-0 because we had this guy, and this guy, but this year we're gonna be fine with 2-8 or 3-7, and the board's gonna be cool with that, or a college program will be cool with that if you were a coach. You'd be out of a job, and they get the next guy. In boxing, there's no such filtering mechanism, no competitive pressure. There is in chess. So in chess, I have to, if I take too much time off from training, like, I lose so many games in a row, it's kind of embarrassing, and that's because everyone's always trying to learn and get better. Even your casual players who don't study, they're just by virtue of being able to get so much time in. But other than that, other than the comparison between kind of the development of the abilities of the practitioners, they're just very different. Like, I wish I could come up with some philosophical spin about the similarities between boxing and chess. And I've tried, believe me, I've tried. And there are some in terms of like, for example, cutting off the ring. The way I used to think about cutting off the ring is the way you would use your rooks to control ranks and push a piece, or the king is like the main target. To cut off lanes for a piece to attack. There are certain tactical ideas that are very similar, but the mindset, nah, man. Like I'll take sitting all day in a chess tournament over waiting all night to go on freaking last on a boxing card, because that's how it is. And they're not last, but like late, man. Boxing is that. I forgot all about that aspect until we started talking about it. My amateur career, man, because they're packing on as many fights as they can because they don't have to pay the fighters. But the more fighters you have on the card, the more people pay to see them. So the person hosting the fight makes a lot. And they're backwards mind. And I actually don't think it's backwards since heavyweight fights tend to be a little more violent because you can cause more damage and guys get knocked out more. And so the heavier they are, the more likely that's to happen. And you want to keep people around because if, like, the knockout happens early and then it's the little guys fighting, you get them out. So as an amateur, I spent a lot of time like showing up to the arena at 6 o'clock and not going on till like 9:30, 10. Really miserable.
Honestly, that time waiting before the matches, that really is stressful, and it's like all the training you put in and all the mental prep and stuff. It's like the fight is nothing compared to those last little bits where you just have to wait to go walk out. Have you coached any fighters too and been in the corner for any fights?
I haven't cornered anyone yet because I've done coaching at a few, not at a few gyms, at one gym here locally, and then did that for about 2 years, and I really enjoy that aspect of coaching and teaching. I don't know if I'll ever corner someone because that's a huge responsibility. And I know it because over the course of my amateur career, I think I was in a very unique position to where I ended up with, I think I probably had over 10 different guys corner me. And, some of those were much longer than others, But what a fighter needs is a system, right? Not okay, yeah, a system. And the way a system develops is the coach should be able to say certain things, you know what those things mean. And you should be able to just react to them quickly because he's got a different viewpoint than you do. So you need to spend a lot of time around that coach to understand his system and the way he thinks and to get that to work with you as well. You know, if he catches something and he tells you what to do, you got to be able to trust that he knows what he's talking about as well. That can only happen over time. And I would never want to come in and give someone, you know, give them all the tools and everything, but because that's only part of it. But they don't have my brain in the corner because, you know, I got other things going on. Now maybe as I move on in my life and take on other things, and I feel or rather reduce other things, and I feel comfortable devoting that time to someone to be with them, you know, for 2 to 3 years and train. You know, I could easily see myself doing it because I enjoy the coaching aspect so much. It really is fun. Teaching in general is awesome.
We like to get into a little bit of fringe, out of the box type things. Like we like to talk about spirituality and whatnot on this podcast. So if you don't mind me asking, I know you've overcame addiction, and I wanted to know, did you take a spiritual approach, or do you actively participate in like a spirituality, like a 12-step program? Or I guess what I'm trying to say is, what worked for you to kick that demon out of, you know, to get that monkey off your back?
So I got lucky, man. I really, you know, and I only know that in retrospect. It's not like there was this crazy confluence of circumstances and I planned for it. So when I realized it was like, you know, when it was really getting bad, man, I went away for 6 months when I enlisted in the Army. And, you know, the first 10 weeks is basic training. You're not drinking. You just get a lot of time to think because you're not even really supposed to socialize. I mean, like later on, you can find like moments here and there to like chat with people. But, you know, I enlisted when I was 28, man. Most of these kids are like, you know, like kids, 18, 19, got really nothing to talk about. But so I had a lot of time to think and reflect. And in that thinking and reflection, I just thought about everything that brought me to the point where I was at. And I said, yeah, you know, there's a problem. And then I went to AIT, which is where you go for your advanced, you know, individual training for your whatever your military occupational specialty is. And while I was there, you know, there's a lot more freedom. I always say that like the AIT is like college without the booze, pretty much. Like you can't have booze in the dorm. You can't drink in uniform. And if you get a pass to go off base, even if you're not in uniform, if they catch you drinking, like, and even if you're like of age, like I was, you're not really, you're probably going to get in trouble. And that can be, depending on the commander, that could be anything from just the UCMJ to where they start, a write-up, a Uniform Code of Military Justice write-up, to where they're like, boop, you're out. So I didn't drink. One time I snuck off. We went and saw Bad Grandpa and bought some liquor and snuck it into the movie theater to pour it into the sodas. But like I didn't really drink. But I made friends that I still have today, and that was the first time in my adult life that I had made friends without alcohol. And that's really important later in the story, not so much initially. But I started to build an identity without alcohol. And I was like, wow, I'm like a cool dude, man. Like I can do this whole like socializing and making friends thing without the background. And then when I came back, I went out, I got like hammered, like December 22nd. And I woke up and I said, yeah, well, this is not going to work for me anymore. And that's when I really tried to get sober. That was when I kicked it, right? Or that was my first day of not drinking, December 23rd.
Wow.
Now, what happened in the next few months is key. I was so busy with my life. Like, what was I doing? Okay, so I had to get a job. I worked at a bank. And then I was in school. That's the reason why I re-enlisted it, so I could get money for school. Or not re-enlisted, enlisted, so I could get money for school. So I was taking classes. I was still training to fight, to be a professional fighter. By this point, I was 3-0 as a pro, and I still had my military occupational drills for my guard unit. And I was in a new relationship that still to this day we got a kid now. It's awesome how these things work. Get your life together.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I can hear him running around out there giving her hell right now. He's 14 months.
Oh boy.
But all of this is to say that for the first 16 months of my sobriety, man, I was too busy to even go out and drink if I wanted to, and I think that's a really important component. That you got to fill that hole with something, and I inadvertently filled it with all of these activities that simultaneously built up my identity that I had started to develop in AIT and basic training to an extent, where people saw me as this person to kind of look up to and respect and all that, and I didn't want to tarnish that. And I also kept myself from being tempted by really being busy. I wasn't going out with my friends because I had no time for that. My wife doesn't drink. I mean, she'll have like a glass of wine. She's the type of person that'll go buy a bottle of wine, pour a glass because she wants to drink, and then forget that she drank, leave half of the glass of wine there and forget we've got a bottle, and it will go bad after 3 months. Like, she's that kind of person. So like, I never had to deal with that pressure at home. So my environment and me changed, and I had a lot of reinforcement when that happened. I actually went to an AA meeting the first night, and let me tell you something, man. I'm sitting there in the meeting, and I'm hearing these stories, and in my arrogance, I was like, I'm not like these people. I got a problem, but I don't have a problem that bad. And then somebody hit me up like 4 years in, and they were like, hey man, I'll be in town, and I'd love to see you go get your chip. And so I went to the meeting with him and got my token. And as I'm sitting there, talking around, because a lot of AA it's not full of like old timers. Like, I don't think I've ever been to a meeting where there's like everyone's got like 5-6 years of sobriety. There's a lot of people, they're in their first 30 days, their first few months. And hearing them stories and looking back with a little more maturity on it, I was like, man, I'm exactly like everybody here. Like, exactly. The only difference is I've stuck with my sobriety longer, and here's how. So there was no like spirituality component to it. And I didn't use AA in the way that most people would think about it. But that's what really ended up working out for me is a happenstance of circumstance. And so what I tell people when they're talking about getting sober, the first thing I recommend is really a 1-2 punch. Is one, you gotta pick up something that's meaningful, not just a hobby, but something that's meaningful that you couldn't do when you were drinking, and you gotta throw yourself into that. And then you also gotta alter your environment. You gotta get away from the influences, because sobriety is a habit, just like drinking's a habit. And so if you want your sobriety habit to get strong enough to resist drinking, much like your drinking habit gets strong enough to you resist sobriety in most scenarios, then you got to practice it. And after a few months, it'll be so strong. Like at this point, if somebody put some booze in front of me, it would be hard for me to drink the booze. Like I'd look at it and go, what is this, and smell it, and it would feel terrible. But it's because time in now with 10 years.
You're right. I mean, everything you said is right on. That's so key. I think it's really important for people to realize that there's no monopoly on recovery. There's no one way to do it. That way worked for you, and there's no one can take that away from you. It worked for you. So that's awesome, dude. I love it. And yeah, 10 years, that's a big mark, man. I got mine coming up, and I wish you all the best.
Oh, man, congrats, man.
Oh,
awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing, because like, I look at my life now and how happy I am and what I have, and I know that none of this would happen if I was still drinking. I wish I could say how I thought, because it doesn't feel like thinking, but it doesn't feel like thinking. I just know how I lived, and my inability to reflect and take responsibility and all that. Like, it was a mess of a person. Anna wouldn't still be here if I was drinking. I know that, because I know how I drank, and I know the type of person she is. And we have a family together, and it's been a great time. I couldn't imagine how I'd get anything or have anything. It would be a different life, and I don't. I'm happy I never went down. I won't say never went down. The way I look at it is like that day on December 23rd. That's my first day of sobriety. I look at that day as like if we could somehow go backwards in time, what you would see is there's a convergence path, and I chose to go down this path of no alcohol as opposed to the other one. And that there's a whole timeline of bullshit I'll never have to deal with, think about, encounter, because I got it out of there. It's not there anymore. I just removed one thing that just caused every other problem.
Same way with me, man. Other than the drugs, I mean, I was a perfectly good, upstanding citizen. And yeah, you're right, man. Getting clean has literally given me a life that I can't even dream of. But I wanted to ask you, is there ever been a time in your life, have you maybe seen something that you can't explain, whether it's maybe something in the sky or maybe something that people would describe as a ghost? Do you have any kind of crazy stories like that?
I don't know if this counts, but I gotta believe. Here's what I believe. I believe I'm meant to be with the woman I'm meant to be with, because when we first met, we were together for like a month or so, a month or two, and I was just like, I don't think this is good for me. But the reality is, it was great for me. She was just normal. So I thought she was messed up. That's how messed up your world gets.
That's
so
funny,
I broke it off. And don't you know that for the next, man, it must have been like 3-4 weeks, where every time we were in the vicinity, my phone told me. Facebook used to have this like, you can see when someone is in your vicinity. It used to tell me when we were in the vicinity of one another. And finally, one day we ended up at the same restaurant for lunch, a restaurant neither of us ever go to. And it started telling me that, like, hey, she's around. And I went and, talk to her and made up and fix some stuff. And so it's an interesting thing, the way that works is that, and then because of that, a lot of these experiences are like with her, because like where we live now, we had to move because we had a kid and we were living in an apartment, and we loved our apartment, but that's just not going to work for a new kid. So we're looking around, all around, and we're getting more and more honed in on what we want, because there's a clock coming up, because that place we were at, man, they're like sharks. They were like, you got to be out by this day, or we're going to charge you $500 plus extra plus the market rate of the rent. Like, God damn, man, just let it, like, can we? And if we leave early, there's no early leaving, nothing. They get every dime out of you. But we looked at this place and they said no pass where we're living now. And so she wrote to them and said, hey, what would you think about a cat? And they wrote back with the snarkiest reply. The guy said, we got a few applications in already. We'll let you know if anything changes. All right. In other words, saying we don't need to make a concession for you and your cat. We have enough people who don't have pets. Well, we said, all right, whatever. And then we go and looked at this place that was like, it was going to work, but neither of us would have been really happy with it. But it would have worked. And so we sent them a message and we said, all right, we're in. They took a week to get back to us. And then when they finally got back to us, they said, we're a bit worried about your income because you guys are both self-employed. She has a travel agency business. And they're like, is there any way you can like prove? And I'm like, we can show you bank statements. I mean, I don't know what else you want. And they took forever to get back to us. And while we're taking forever to get back to us, her sister decides to help out and look and sends us the same place that we asked about the cat on. We were like, oh, we already looked at it. And then Anna catches something on it. And she goes, I think this is it's written a little different. And so she writes a message to him. And the guy goes, yeah, I think I could make something work if it's just a cat. And I'm like, what? So it was a random. So it turns out somebody had took over the listing from him. He didn't know. And then her sister just happened to randomly get involved, see the same place. And it's perfect. Like in terms of everything that we wanted, it is perfect. And it only showed up, like if we had got the place we wanted, initially, and they weren't like being weird about our self-employed income, we would have had a place to live, but we wouldn't have liked it. But now we're like, we really like it here, and we're very happy. So there's just like these like random coincidences. Cause like I never say I'm a non-believer, right, of ghosts or anything like that. What I say is that there's nothing in science that says they can't exist, and I don't have any experience with the spooks, right? I just don't have it, right? I do have a lot of experience with like these weird little things that don't ever happen again, and the stars would have to be really perfect for them to even happen in the first place. And when they do, they benefit us and benefit me tremendously. And so I have to believe that I'm here for just so many ways. I mean, just stories from addiction. Like I've been pulled over while I was drinking and driving. Been pulled over on 4 separate occasions, and each time it just, for whatever reason, they were like, "Go home." And then one of the times I was pulled over, the guy was like, I took the test, and he said, "You're probably a little over the limit, but we're gonna let you get out of here tonight." And I'm just like, huh. And good on them, for letting me go. I mean, or maybe bad, depending. But I can't imagine. I have to believe that I've been spared from the worst parts of my decisions for a reason, and that's how that ties into my spirituality in that regard. I 100% believe, because there's no other explanation either that or I'm the luckiest motherfucker like on the planet, and I just don't buy it, like So that's how that goes, man. I feel like my life is being guided, and the more I surrender, I don't want to say surrender to that guidance. The more I understand that there's a purpose, and I move as if there's a purpose greater than just what I want to get out of things, the more I seem to get from life.
Yeah, I love all that. I think the synchronicities and the little small things, even though they don't seem, so supernatural or whatnot at the time, like you said, you feel like it's being guided in a direction. And yeah, the more you are open to that, the more it kind of pops up and stuff. And Mike kind of beat me to it to segue into the ghosts and the weird stuff that we like to get into on this show. But I was going to say, I don't know if you guys know that the word alcohol comes from the word al-Kul or al-Ghul, which means body-eating spirit in Arabic. And they call, like at liquor stores or whatever, will be like wine and spirits, liquor and spirits. So sometimes they think that, there's a spirit associated with drinking, and it'll, make you do things you wouldn't normally do as if you were under the influence of something else. But
that's crazy.
Kind of steer things in a different route. So I remember you said you were very anti-college, but you have a physics degree.
Yeah.
So you ended up changing your mind and getting back into that. So to kind of put a different spin on that, is there anything you've kind of learned while studying physics that might not be common knowledge, or made you question the nature of reality, or maybe preconceived notions that some people have,
like flat earth?
Oh man, I spend a lot of time. It's like, okay, so I don't argue with people's opinions because it's your opinion. I don't even care if you present your opinion as fact. But once I recognize it's how you feel, I don't really care, right? Because we all can feel how we want to feel. That's what makes the world great. But the flat earthers, man, I go round for round because we've known the world has not been flat for a very long time, like a long time, man. And so for like this to be the thing that people harp on is like beyond me. And there are really simple experiments you can do to kind of prove this. You got to understand math a little, but not like higher level math. They did it in Egypt thousands of years ago before there was technology, and you can do the same thing. Like all you got to do is like go to a basketball court over there and look at the shadow throughout the day, and then go back and see it happen again, and understanding what a cycle looks like when you graph it in 2 dimensions. You go, oh, we must be on a circle. But that's neither here nor there. As far as like things that I have seen One of the, or learned really that had an impact on my life. When you study, okay, so there's a relationship. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. A lot of people know that as like the Pythagorean theorem, and they know it, but they're like, oh, what's that good for? Triangles. Well, turns out that relationship shows up in everything from statistics to probability to general relativity to quantum mechanics. And the first time you see it, you're like, okay. The second time you see it, you're like, huh. And you keep seeing it, and you realize that like the universe seems to be built on these fundamental laws that are like really weird, like the way. And I'm going somewhere with this other than just pointing out these laws. All right, are like the way electricity behaves or the way a charge behaves in electricity is no different than the way mass behaves in a gravitational field, or the way a charged particle behaves in an electric field is how a particle with mass behaves in a gravitational field. Cool stuff, right? And I'm just like, what is this? It's like the universe was designed with intent. They aren't just coincidences because or they could be, right? Of course, they could be coincidences, or I could be reading too much into it. That's always possible, right? I don't think I am. And so what that makes me feel is that even if you don't have a thought process that says, God is a specific entity that exists in the sky or something like that, it's very hard for me to buy that the universe we live in is just a random assortment that happened to spontaneously organize itself, which like goes against everything we know. Like order does not happen spontaneously over time. It's the reverse, right? The things get disordered, and so you see that, and you look at the universe, and it is just it's hard for me to believe this universe wasn't designed. And then from that point, I make the natural leap that there's got to be creator. Now, do I believe he's a benevolent creator? I don't think he gives a damn. That's my spiritual stuff creeping in. I guess my spiritual bias, but I definitely believe that there is a creator that is responsible, that everything kind of flows from, and whether you call that God, or I actually don't know what else you would call it in terms of our language. I hear people use the source, something like that. I've heard that, but that's the how where physics and what I've seen and how that's helped me, or really has led me to become a more spiritual person.
Yeah, I love that, because a lot of people seem to nowadays kind of draw a line between science and spirituality and consider them two totally separate things. But
oh, that's crazy.
Crossover,
right? Man, to consider those two things separate is to not know both well enough at all.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yeah, I think that's a lot of times what you see manifested. I mean, it's when you argue with somebody about the existence of God, right? Whether they're agnostic or atheist, right? And there are weaknesses in both arguments, but the point is that I'm bringing up is that they typically have not thought about the next. They attack the straw man version of the argument, right? And the straw man version of the argument centers around like, why would God let these things happen if He's benevolent? And I go, I in this respect, I agree with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he said that like you got to assume that He's either not all powerful or not all good. And I'm like, yeah, that the Bible even says He's not all good or all powerful. I mean, the Old Testament Bible God was raining bullshit on people. It's crazy. But all of this is, I say all that to say that like typically a person attacks that idea, and they don't attack the real idea, which is, is it possible that there's something greater than yourself that all of this comes from? That is an argument that stumps a lot of people who like to attack the idea of there not being a creator. And then when you do that, right, even to make the argument, oh, entropy, right? That's a fun one. You got to at least understand entropy. Now you can come up with a different argument, but at least be able to counter my point to it. Or don't, like, let's not talk about a man in the sky, but let's talk about why religion, because like then there's the argument that like a lot of evil is done in the name of religion. Well, a lot of good has been done in the name of it too. Like, I'm not saying that it's good or bad. I'm saying that that's no reason to discard it, because you're not going to discard the good stuff, right? You're gonna focus on the bad stuff, because that's what's been when you approach it from this childlike thing. It's like when you're a kid and your mom forces you to go to church. You don't want to go, so you think about it. So your arguments are childlike in that regard, that you only go, well, I don't want to deal with this, so I'm not gonna embrace it or understand it. And I'm not trying to convert anyone. That's never my goal. And I'm probably not even the best guy to even try and do that. All I like to do is present good arguments and look at kind of the best possible way I could look at something and use it to benefit me. And I think there's a lot. I think religion has an incredible ability to do that. And lack of it, people are going to believe in something. And so if you remove something that makes you become better, then you end up with people worshiping shit like the pasta man. I wish I was making that up.
Yeah, I wish you were too. Going back, to what you were saying about, it looks like there's definitely an intelligent design behind this. You mentioned some of the things that kind of give you the reasoning, and another one is the golden ratio. We seem to see that everywhere in nature too.
Right.
Almost like it's a simulation. Have you ever thought about that at all?
I have thought about the simulation theory, right? And I have arguments back and forth with this all the time. So, okay, if we are in a simulation or we're not, what's the implication of it if we're in a simulation versus not? Or rather, what can we do about it is how I look at the problem. Because, because to me, like, arguing that there is an afterlife or something like that, or the existence of God, I think that's a much more interesting argument. Because if there is God, right, maybe you should act a little better, right, where you live. It's like the Faustian, the Faustian bargain, maybe, or something like that. Not Faust, or where it goes. If there isn't a God,
Pascal wager.
Pascal wager, that's what it is. I'm thinking of the one where Pascal's wager, exactly. Where if there isn't a God and you act right, the worst case scenario is that you act right. But if there is a God and you act like shit, well, there's going to be some hell to pay literally after life. So that argument is interesting to me, okay?
Me too.
But the simulation argument, what can I do about it? Like, how will it change how I live, whether we're in one or not, right? Now, right, like, I try to think about it. There's nothing. So I think it's interesting in the sense that, that would explain some hard limits, right? Like the speed of light seems to be a hard limit that we can't even get close to. But that's just me, nerding out thinking of interesting ideas. But I never give the simulation argument give it much thought, because there's no heart. It's like arguing the existence of God, but it removes the responsibility that would come with accepting or denying. Like, it removes kind of how your life would change if you regardless of with which conclusion you reach. So I don't really think about it.
I'm with you on the Pascal's wager, man. To me, that is the most satisfying and best argument to believe in a higher power, because it's like, okay, I might as well, right? I got nothing to lose, so yeah.
Nothing to lose.
Might as well.
But you know what people feel like they lose? They feel like they lose the freedom to be degenerate assholes. Like, that's how I feel. Whether that's accurate or not, I'm sure someone will hear this and be like, "You're wrong," right? And I could be. It's my opinion, but I think, like, when you are forced to take on responsibility changes you. Awareness changes you. You have to look at it's like drinking. You know why drinking is appealing a lot of times? Because because when you're under the influence, your behavior is excused, or at the very least, there is an excuse for it. Now, whether someone buys it, like if you run over somebody while you're drinking, or versus sending a text, both of them done under the influence. One of them you can get a pass on, the other not so much, right? But either way, like the old Jamie Foxx song, blame it on the alcohol. It removes responsibility because you numb yourself to the truth of your surroundings and your behavior. It's the same idea. If you get to go, there's nothing greater. You go, okay, well, let's just run on a hedonistic treadmill and enjoy the decline kind of deal, and take no responsibility for ourselves because none of it matters.
Spirit of Al-Cool. That's our excuse. Sorry, it was the spirits.
That's great.
It's been a great talk. Thanks, Ed.
No, this was great.
Hey, thank you guys. I don't. You know what's funny, man? For all of 2023, I was working on my book, and I said I'm not doing podcasts. So my wife was like, I was about to cook some steaks, and she was like, "Don't you got a podcast?" I was like, "Oh, that's right. I'm off my." So because my motto, I love talking to people, and I think there's a lot to be gained. So I just kind of go on anyone's show, and I'll sometimes do research, but not usually. And I'm always happy when it turns out to be such a great conversation. And this was a great conversation.
So yeah, we covered a lot of different things there, dude. I really liked Ed. He seems like a dude that I could definitely go smoke a joint with and just chill.
Yeah, super easy to talk to, and I like when we have the rather intellectual guests on that will kind of confirm or play along with some of the wilder topics, or they're in a similar train of thought of other guests and stuff. It's more digestible for skeptical minds, if you will.
Yeah, there's no fluff to him. He's not a guy that believes in a lot of crazy shit. I threw out the flat earth thing, and he laughed it off. And I'm with him on a lot of things. I like a lot of his thoughts on addiction. I think he is in the minority about being able just to drop it cold turkey like that, and he realized that at a young age. So I think, as he even said, he was lucky in that regard. So yeah, I really liked a lot of what he was putting out there, dude. Smart guy. Love to have him back on when his book's out and he's doing that massive media blitz that you gotta do for a book. Ed Latimore, good fucking guy. Like we said earlier on, trying to build a community of like-minded individuals. So if you want to be a part of that, you could be one of the very first Conspiracy and Chill Syndicate members by going to Patreon and joining the syndicate. Something you can do to help the podcast out tremendously, and it doesn't cost you anything. Just go on whatever platform you're listening to us on, give us a 5-star review. Even if you haven't listened to us yet, just go and give us one, because you're probably going to feel that way in the end anyway. That's what I'm thinking. So, do all those things. Like us, love us, follow us, subscribe, X, Instagram, YouTube, all that good shit. And what else, brother?
No, that's pretty much it. If you are enjoying it, then that's our transactional ask. You get some fun conversations and some good information. We get our 5-star review. That's our mutual deal here, huh?
That's fair. And you could also be one of the very first Conspiracy and Chill Syndicate members, because we have a free tier. So, it's like, why the fuck not? Why wouldn't you? Kind of like Pascal's wager that we talked about a little bit earlier in the conversation with Ed, right? It's a win-win. Stay away from child molesters.